Fear Street Part 3 1666, the final installment of the Netflix horror trilogy, filmed back to back and released one by one over the course of 3 weekends. All the movies take place in different time periods, but same location, a town apparently cursed by a witch a long time ago and plagued by various serial killers over the years. The film picks up exactly where the last one ended. The kids in 1994 figured out what happened in 1978, and with that knowledge, they managed to bury the complete remains of Sarah Fier, the supposed witch. Whilst doing so, Dina, the main character, goes into a sort of extended vision slash trance slash flashback, which ends up being an hour-long flashback to 1666. So we spent half the film there reliving the actual story of Sarah Fier and finding out the real truth behind the curse. And then we get back to 1994 again for the final confrontation with the villain from that time period. So the first movie I thought was pretty bad, a very derivative and sanitized slasher film for kids. Second film I thought was slightly better. The character relationships were more interesting. It had a cool twist at the center of it as well. And then I had quite high hopes for the final part, seeing as we would be getting, first of all, the most unique time period of them all with the Puritan village, but also with the interesting decision to use the same actors from the previous two movies as these characters in the old days as well. Well, the result is that the 1666 half of the film is actually, I'd say it's fairly okay. It does feel like an, again, very sanitized and safe version of The Witch at times, but it did draw me in somewhat. Thing is, it ends fairly quickly, and soon after that, we're back in 1994, and the film just takes an immediate dive and becomes essentially a repeat of the final act of the first movie almost. Now, there are several other problems that I had with the film, other than my general dislike of it. First of all, it is dark as shit. And I don't mean the nature of the story, I mean the brightness of the screen. On the one hand, I get that you can't have electric lights in a Puritan time period, but I think there must have been ways to get around that. And secondly, I admit I watched it during the day, so maybe that's part of it. But still, there were long scenes and sequences where I couldn't make out what was going on at all. Another thing that bothered me to an extent in the previous two films already, but I didn't actually say anything because it wasn't that much of a problem, but now I feel I have to speak up. You make movies that take place in distinct time periods, the 90s, the 70s, now finally the 17th century. But there is very little in the film that would maintain that illusion, that would channel the time period. The costumes, yes, and to some extent the locations, but the way the characters behave and talk, it's just 100% the same as in modern day. And I feel that there should be differences in the language. I mean, some in the 1990s, some more perhaps in the 1970s, but especially the Puritan Irish characters in the 17th century. When they speak exactly the same way as teenagers do in 2020, now we have a problem. Because it's like cheap cosplay. I didn't believe in the reality of the film at that point. And also, don't take this the wrong way, but this Puritan Irish village has a surprisingly high amount of black people in it, and it's cool that we're casting black actors, but I feel maybe not in this particular setting. It just looks out of place. The entire story doesn't fully make sense at all, as well, when all is said and done. There are elements that are plot holes or straight up nonsense or inconsistent rules, like sometimes the murderers only attack people with the blood of the cursed person in them or on them, but sometimes they also kill innocents, depending on the scene. Also, this will be a rant somewhat, but I just can't stand this thing. There is a trope in movies, particularly horror movies, where a character needs to cut themselves to get some blood. And every time they do it, they cut the inside of their hand, the palm of their hand, which is the stupidest fucking place you can pick if you think about that for 1 second, because that place stretches and moves all the time, so it will not heal for a long time. It apparently hurts like hell, and also it's your hand. You kind of want to use it, which would be almost impossible with such an injury, with a large cut like that, because of the pain and the bleeding. Why not just cut the top of your arm or a leg? Anyway, whenever I see this, it instantly takes me out of the film. And in this one, it happens twice for the same character. First on one hand, then on the other. Holy shit, was I angry about it. So yeah, there's a lot of seemingly tiny things that are annoying about the film. But when you put them all together, well, the whole thing is kind of annoying as a result. And it does wrap things up in a somewhat okay way. So if you enjoyed the previous two, I suppose you like this one as well. But it's just not as good as I thought it could have been, and having now seen the entire trilogy, I can say with all certainty that it's not worth the time investment.